I know I knew her before this, but my most vivid J.Lo imprint on my life is when a very cool girl freshman year decided to have a butt measuring contest in the hallway. And this was the year 2000. So this is when Abercrombie jeans were supposed to stay up by hanging on those little hip bones. You weren't supposed to have a butt. No. So whoever was going to have the biggest butt was going to lose. And I lost. And then like an angel on a float covered in fairy dust, J.Lo entered pop culture and having a butt and having curves, and suddenly we could wear juicy sweatpants, which are elastic. And I just remember her as a savior to body image.
You know, it's so funny because that's been so normalized, like vis-a-vis the Kardashians, but it was very disruptive at the time.
Extremely. She made the Kardashians. And now it's funny because with all of her, you know, all the work she has done, but she sells a skincare line, but then she says it's olive oil, and it's like obviously not olive oil. She's doing perhaps a disservice to all of our body images. But in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, she was the first woman with curves that I knew of as a teenager who was treated as just as hot as Kate Moss heroin chic.
This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
And I'm Chelsea Devontes. I am the author of the memoir, I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, and I host the podcast Glamorous Trash, where we read female celebrity memoirs.
It's so good. I don't even like celebrity memoirs, except for one. We can talk about this later, but
I do need to know which one.
Well, okay.
Two, I need both.
I used to study classic Hollywood, like in my academic career.
Yeah.
And a lot of those memoirs are total, just like so boring. But Gloria Swanson wrote a memoir that was released at the end of her life, which is always good, right? It's like kind of like Barbara. And it was called Swanson on Swanson. And
yes, I've heard of this one.
I think it's like 700 pages.
Oh, and
so
I'm
good.
So sorry because you're now my podcast guest for that episode, and you booked yourself whether you wanted to or not. And
most
can't
of the
wait to discuss.
Listenership is like, who's Gloria Swanson? And I'm like, let me tell you.
But some of the old ones that are good, people need to know who they are. I mean, even Lonnie Anderson, who is the 70s or 80s, people don't know who she is anymore. But that memoir is so good.
Didn't you do one on Delta Burke?
I did.
Yeah.
So I actually covered Delta Burke's memoir. It was one of the first episodes I did on my podcast in 2020 because I just love her so much. And then I just got to interview her about her memoir. And it was like her first interview in 20 years.
What?
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Because she was so viciously mistreated by the press.
She was.
She said, I don't think I need to do any interviews for you vile monsters. And then when I hired PR for my book, she said, what do you want to do? Like, what kind of things do you want to do? And I said, I want to send a letter to Delta Burke. And she was like, okay, I don't think you know how PR works because we need to, what are you talking about? And I was like, I feel like you know people. Can you get her a letter from me? Because she was the very first celebrity memoir I ever read. And then I sent her a letter and then she came on the podcast. And I mean, the old gems of books have so much tea in them. It's unbelievable. Like the people who went there in an era when, authenticity wasn't as hot and cool as it is now, they went there just out for blood. I love it.
This is actually a great segue to talking about your memoir. How did celebrity memoirs inform yours? Because you're a celebrity, right? Like, so how do you think about it?
Absolutely not. To everyone who just heard my name, they went, no, she's not. No, but they did heavily influence me in part because celebrity memoirs have always been my favorite book genre. And that is what happens when your nearest bookstore growing up is a Walmart.
Yeah.
And so I also grew up in small towns and Us Weekly, People, celebrity memoirs. Obviously, I had a library card. I read a lot, but I wanted to be in this industry. So I always wanted to know what these women who had succeeded in this industry had to say. And on top of that, the good celebrity memoirs have been talking about abortion and traumatic relationships and abuse and men trying to come on to you when you're at work and how do you still get the role and all these things that like really were not okay to talk about. And they've been in these books this whole time.
Yes.
And yet we've branded them as trash literature. And so I genuinely love the books. Listen, some of them very bad. I still enjoy reading them, but the good ones are good. And so I just have always loved the art of memoir. And I don't think I would have gotten the chance to write my own memoir, which I've always wanted to do, unless I started a podcast where I cover these memoirs, which, I started it in 2020. So I think we've covered at least 150 memoirs at this point. And that is what really helped me build the community that led to someone emailing me saying, you should write a book. And I said, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. Please, please, anything.
What, reading all of these memoirs and talking about them, what interests you the most about the ways that celebrities learn to narrativize their own lives?
Well, I think it's definitely gendered, at least for me. And I wonder if you'll agree, which is that women have never been able to tell their own story, especially the more famous they get. And so our perception of these women have always been written by the male-led media. And especially if we're talking about, J.Lo in the early 2000s, just the articles written about her ass. It's just unbelievable things said. And so when a woman decides to tell her own story, to me, it's incredibly healing, and it's the way I want to do my trauma work. Like, I want to fix my body image by reading Jessica Simpson's memoir, talking about how when we called her fat, she was a size 4. And then I want to look up those photos. And now I've done 10 years of therapy. That's how I want to do it. It's fun. It's gossipy. I'm going to learn about John Mayer showering in her parents' house. Like, that's how I want to, that's how I want to grow as a person personally. It's more fun. And so I'm not even a real fan of biography. I really like memoir. I want to know your version of it.
Right. Well, and I also, previous lifetime, I was approached to potentially audition to ghostwrite one of the Jonas Brothers memoirs.
What does a ghostwriting audition look like?
Oh, it's more like, okay, so let's have a conversation about like how you would approach this kind of thing. I didn't talk, I didn't get past the point of like having a conversation with the agent.
I see. Yes.
But, and I've never actually admitted this because you're supposed to be so hush hush about it, but I figure enough time has passed.
It's a new era.
It's fine. And that process too is so fascinating to me, that essentially you have someone who you tell a lot of stories to, and then that person has to figure out, okay, how do I turn that into a story, right?
And the good ghostwriters can make your book incredible. And the bad ones will destroy you. Todd Gold, you know who you are. I'm out for you. I need him to know we are enemies. He doesn't care about me. He wrote Drew Barrymore's book when she was 14 and in rehab. And and it's so interesting too, because haven't you felt like classically people have looked down on ghostwriters? They're like, well, if you used a ghostwriter, it's not a real book. And all I can say about celebrity memoirs is please use a ghostwriter and pick a good one, because the people who don't, you can't just learn how to write a book the next day. It's hard stuff. And I love the ones that use good ghostwriters. It makes the best stories.
Okay, so back to J.Lo. I grew up in a small town in Idaho, and my primary mode of access to pop culture was through a subscription to Entertainment Weekly.
Yes.
And so I knew a lot about things that were happening without necessarily ever watching them. So I knew a lot about Selena before the movie came out.
Yeah.
So that was that's one of my memories of that, and of the song from the soundtrack, Dreaming of You, that was so big. But J.Lo didn't sing it, Selena sings it. And
very
then also
to note.
I was, yes, very important. I also was not allowed to watch In Living Color, the sketch show. Because,
too risque?
Yeah, basically everything on Fox, I think my mom thought was rude. So The Simpsons was rude, Married with Children was rude.
Listen, she's not wrong. They are rude.
So I would sneak shows on Fox, including In Living Color. And yesterday I was watching, because I knew she was a fly girl. And I was like, I saw her before I saw her. I knew her before I knew her, which is really interesting. That was my, In Living Color is so much less polished than SNL or than any of the music videos that I was watching, sneaking as well on MTV at that same time.
Oh, yeah. And it's an unpolished version of J.Lo.
Yes.
And I think I love reading memoirs for so many reasons, but also you start to connect different tidbits from different books. And Rosie Perez, who was the dance captain and boss of the Fly Girls, wrote an entire section about J.Lo and what she was like. And that was kind of J.Lo's like first big break. And they almost fought each other in the street.
Yeah.
That was their beef. Yeah.
So when we came up with the idea to do a J.Lo episode, I asked for host suggestions. This is on Instagram. I cannot tell you. I think I received 100 recommendations for you.
What? I was wondering how I got here. That's amazing. Okay, thank you, everyone.
And I know that you've done, like I was watching one of your TikToks the other day where you're looking at the cups from the wedding. So I know that there is some content, but what makes you an aficionado of J.Lo?
Of Jennifer Lopez. Well, yes. I hate to ask this, but have you read J.Lo's memoir? And I'm going to use quotes when I say memoir.
I have not, but I know you have.
So her memoir is one of the most frustrating books of all time because all you want is J.Lo. And she wrote it, I think, in 2014. And like, I was just so excited for that book. And it is mostly photos. Could have been a Slim magazine with the amount of story
it's
in
like
it.
One of those like people commemorative magazines, right?
Yes,
yes, that's
exactly.
Like for sale. Yeah.
And I say on my podcast, you cannot escape your book. Some piece of you always ends up in the book, even when it's just promotional materials. But if there's one person who comes close to not being in her book, it's J.Lo. She really tried to not be in there. And so I've always loved her, always wanted to know about her. Her book is a huge disappointment, but it's still one of the first episodes I covered because I remember reading it backstage. And then I think I became a Jennifer Lopez expert sincerely when I looked at photos of her wedding and began posting it. And this is because I got married myself and it ruined my personality. And now my For You page has wedding stuff all over it. Still, it was 2 years ago. And so I was kind of I'd been through the wedding game of making all those decisions recently.
Yeah.
And her wedding photos come up. And all I could think is, she's the queen of weddings. It's her fifth. She knows how to plan a wedding, and she's put on the dress for all of us. She's done it. She's done all of it. And she has this, like, I'm cool. I'm Jenny from the block of the Bronx, baggy pants, jaw roll duets. Like, she's cool, right? And then her wedding to the absolute love of her life, Ben Affleck, is one of the most basic and ugliest things you've ever seen. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. I was, how are these live, laugh, love signs there? How are Christmas tree garlands wrapped in pearls next to this Georgia foliage, which is a totally different climate? And the wedding dress choice itself, it was like dressing to be different versus dressing to be yourself. And then I found these cups that she had at her wedding. And then those cups have ruined my life. And that's the TikTok you watched. And I felt I entered a space where I understood her taste for the first time.
Yes.
And that has changed how I look at her in her career.
I think that the documentary does something similar. And I think that it's like part of it is that she has aged into it and she has complete freedom.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But before we get too deep into this, I think we should start with the questions because this will give us an opportunity to talk about all of these things.
I love it.
I was somewhat surprised by how many of the questions we received were kind of dogging on her because I really like her. Like, I really like her. She's a likable celebrity. And I think
absolutely.
That
she's our rom-com queen. You cannot star in that many rom-coms without being wildly likable because that's what they require of rom-com leads. The most likable woman on earth.
And like the whole narrative of what's happened with Ben Affleck, like, oh my gosh, like I was absolutely riveted. But I think that since the documentary and the movie, which like no one has seen the movie, but the documentary, like, there's been a little bit of a shift. So let's get to the questions. This first one is from Stephanie.
It feels like a lot of recent criticism of J.Lo is rooted in sexism and classism, but also like people haven't been paying attention to who she is and what she's been doing for the past 30 years. Why does being with Ben change the way that people look at her?
Okay, so I think we have to remember all of the discourse around the first iteration of Bennifer. Like, What do you remember from that time in the early 2000s?
I remember he kissed her butt on a yacht. Beautiful slow kiss.
Yes.
I remember that, to me, that reaction was actually a very racist and sexist reaction
Yeah.
of, he had been with Gwyneth Paltrow, and to see him with J.Lo kind of broke her mind. I think the only thing that made it make sense is a meme I saw, which was, imagine both of their most recent exes dating, which would have been P. Diddy and Gwyneth Paltrow. And then you sort of are like, okay, I see how this is odd to people. And I remember that they called off their wedding 3 days. 3 days before they were to walk down the aisle, which means those doves were paid for.
That is some Julia Roberts and Kiefer Sutherland shit, which is knowledge for any of the real ones who know all about like early 90s gossip like me. But there was just like this overexposure, right? And when we talk about overexposure, oftentimes like it's a way of saying that like they're too much, they're too trashy in some way. Like they coveted or sought attention in a way that was unbecoming. And I do think that there are often class connotations with that understanding. Like she wanted fame too much. Yeah. And she needed to recede from the spotlight. And now it seems like that really was the cause of the demise of their relationship. Like we kind of understood that at the time, but it wasn't, fully acknowledged.
It's interesting because had she just shown up and been like, I'd like a job and I'd like to be an actress, people would have said, you're being too much. You want too much. You're trying to be famous. You're a diva bitch. Get out of here. Like that's no question. What's fascinating about J.Lo is that she really did want fame and does and currently can't let it go. She's in a phase of life where she could just be with Ben, but she's got to make her movie about it. And that's always been the thing about her, which is that, and Rosie Perez stated it, and everyone who's known her says she goes after what she wants and she won't let go and she'll push for it. So I think people were reacting in an ignorant way and also picking up something a little true.
And I mean, the word we have for that is that she is incredibly ambitious.
Yeah. Worst thing a woman can be.
I think sometimes, Beyonce is also incredibly ambitious, but there is a little bit of a difference in talent. And I don't say that in a mean way, right? Like, I think that J.Lo is probably just as good of a dancer as Beyonce.
I think J.Lo's an incredible dancer.
Yes.
I mean, I would put her dancing as her top talent.
Yes. Same. Yeah. I was Melody, because she's a wee baby who was a child in 2000. She didn't know the way that J.Lo came to fame, right? Which was that she was a dancer first.
Yeah.
And then gets cast in Selena and becomes more of a movie star and then becomes really a singer, right? Like, it's not until 99, right, is the first album, I think?
Yeah, and it's really Tommy Mottola trying to ruin Mariah Carey's life that makes J.Lo's career. I mean, that's just
Okay, yeah, tell me more about this. Tell me more about this.
So you can read multiple sources, but like I said, my favorite would be Mariah Carey's memoir, where she writes chapters about this. And, Mariah Carey famously gives the quotes, I don't know her. That's how much she hates J.Lo. And it's a tough female feud because it really is Tommy Mottola's fault.
Yes.
And now these two women hate each other. But Mariah Carey divorces Tommy. She married him when she was 18. He was 20 years her senior. It was a horrible existence. Yeah. She gets free.
I even knew that as a teen, right?
Yeah.
I was like,
oh, yeah. So she finally gets free and he does what every powerful man does when a woman divorces him. He says, let's find ways to ruin her. I have money. And he finds the way he's going to do this is via J.Lo. And he steals songs that Mariah Carey was going to use in Glitter and gives them to J.Lo. When Mariah Carey is doing a duet with Ja Rule, he finds a producer and says, get a Ja Rule duet with J.Lo and get it out before the Mariah Carey one.
And that was Ain't That Funny?
I think it might have been I'm Real.
Oh, I'm Real.
Yeah. And he is building J.Lo piece by piece as a machine to drive Mariah Carey crazy. And it works. And I think what's on the table is how much did J.Lo know? How much was she a participant in this? And it doesn't seem to matter to Mariah because she'll just hate her forever. And Tommy always told Mariah, you'll never survive without me. You'll never survive without me. And then her first project, Glitter, totally bombs.
Yeah.
So the thing that the abusive man said to her came true. You can't do it without me. And then J.Lo rises as Mariah Carey has her breakdown.
And J.Lo rises. She rises and rises and rises. And then we get like Jiggly, right? That
Gigli.
that like essentially like that's a turning point in her start. So overexposure, breakup with Ben, recedes, and still has like, you know, is still in the public consciousness. She marries Mark Antony. She has twins. I think she was just kind of hanging out there as like, oh, we know who J.Lo is, until somewhat recently. And that has reignited some of these discourses around this, like her original rise to fame. And like the idea that she doesn't sing, right? Like,
well, that one, yeah. So we have to talk about the idea that she can't sing. So, yeah. You know, with the tide turning, there are now singers on TikTok saying, I am the Ginny from The Block Singer, and singing it. And, you know, or Ashanti being on the tracks, the original tracks. And, you know, it's interesting because I think 5 years ago, I tweeted some joke. I wish I could remember it. But it's something like, I love that J.Lo is a singer because it means I'm a singer. We're all singers. And I was run off the internet for a hot second. People were like, how dare you? And now the perception is totally flipped. And I think that became clear when she sang at the inauguration. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is key about J.Lo. To know you can hear, you know your own voice, and you're gonna sing live at the inauguration. And you cannot sing from sea to shining sea. So you're going to lower the key of that note. We're not going to hit that note. So you got to lower the key of that song. You're not even going to choose a different song. That wasn't even the whole song you were singing. You were singing This Land Is Your Land. Just stick with that one. But this dogged persistence she has that made her so successful in the beginning, made her one of the first few Latina stars to break through and star in rom-coms, is now, I feel, her undoing. She's got to do the therapy thing we all do where you realize that one quality you had as a kid that helped you survive is now hurting you.
Yes. Yes. No, and I think you see this in the documentary too. Like she wants it so bad, and you can tell that it's torturing her. Like it makes her really unhappy. Yeah. That she can't succeed with this movie, right? That she wants to do this.
I love that you keep calling it a movie. You know, Twitter called it A Minute Made Lemonade, and I've never been able to get that out of my head.
I haven't seen it. I've only seen clips from it.
You haven't seen it?
No, but the way that I've seen clips from it. I couldn't bring myself to watch it because I knew from the way that she talked, like all of these characters who are playing like the signs, right? Like all of the shots that they do of the weddings.
I had a watch party for its debut. The moment it was streaming avail, I had 20 people in my living room. We drank DeLola and we watched.
What's your take on it?
So I say this with love because I've done it. Now, the difference between me and J.Lo is that mine's still private on Vimeo and hers was made for $20 million and she did a docuseries of it. But it's very your first film. It's very your college collage. And I love in the documentary when Ben is trying to stop her from making certain decisions. But it is just a collage of ideas. And she's also someone who she wants to play in the realm of authenticity, but also will not let herself be herself.
Right. Like she doesn't know what the there is. She thinks that like having herself as a kid is somehow like doing some real, doing real work, right?
Yes. But this goes back to the taste thing with her, that like where I think J.Lo breaks our brains because, you know, she's cool, she's artsy, she's doing this film, and she's like running around with it. But it's like the thesis of the film is astrology is real and good and is the reason I've been divorced. The thesis is I was with the wrong astrological sign. J.Lo is, she's given Trisha Lynn at the Cherrywood Mall in Minnesota picking out a fun pillow that says "Another Day, Another Sleigh." That is J.Lo. She is her bedazzled Starbucks cup. But we refuse to mesh the two together of her taste and what we think she is.
Right. Right. She's not like, like Beyonce's like weaving together all of these like Beyonce has done the reading. Like Beyonce has taken a graduate class in like thinking through some of these ideas about like what is genre? Genre is unstable. What is country music? What are all the roots of country music?
What
How can
symbolism
I weave these
and
together?
activism? Yeah.
Right. Again, like I don't think that this means that J.Lo's a worse person. She's just a different person.
It's taste. It's taste. If someone, it really is her taste. You can see it in the wedding decor. You can see it in the Starbucks cup. You can see it in her movie where, you can see it in her 73 questions where I think they say everything she says is the thought you had when you were 20. And it does matter. So it's like the other theme of the movie is you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. Great, good message. But we know.
I gave that advice to people when I was 20, right? Yeah. And also like that's like youth group advice. That's like what
this is our level one. And she's giving it to us as her, she's 50 years old and has finally done her own project fully by herself, and this is what she has to pass on. But she's like that with a lot of things where it's like she's got that first thought idea.
It's like the novel that she needed to write, but she didn't need to release it, but she doesn't know how to do that. Like she only knows how to perform in public, right?
And
also, it's not real.
It's not the novel she needs. She still hasn't done it.
Yeah.
That movie talking about why she had so many relationships and then ends back up with Ben. It's because he was the right astrological sign and she fixed the heart factory by loving herself. That's not it. No. That's not it. That's not why you called off your wedding 3 days prior to Ben Affleck and within 6 months are married to Mark Anthony. That can't be it.
Hey, it's Anne. I wanted to give you a heads up on some of the episodes we're working on so you can submit your questions. Next week, we're recording with a guest host who wrote a memoir about her former life as a trad wife. What do you want to ask her about that experience and about the fascination with trad wives right now? Later this month, we'll be recording with Nick Qua about something kind of meta, the state of podcasting today. Whatever you want to know about this weird and struggling industry, Nick can answer. We're also working on a show about cooking that we're still kind of trying to figure out. It's something like, why does the internet make finding something to cook feel overwhelming? But also, what does it mean that we can all find and cook recipes from other cultures? And also, how does cooking tie you to your roots or not? So something about the internet and cooking. We need your questions to help us figure it out. And as always, if none of these shows inspire you, tell us what you would like to hear. You can submit questions and show ideas in the same place. It's at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod. Thank you so much for being such a huge part of what makes this show so fun to make and to listen to. We literally cannot do it without you. Okay, back to the show. Okay, so next question I think is about aging in public, and I think we have to talk about this. So Let's hear from Joanna.
Why is J.Lo still doing the ingenue thing? It is wild to me that I, a fully fledged middle-aged woman, am all the way in my comfy pants and flat shoes era, while she, 10 years my senior, keeps trying to play the young babe. Is there any hope that she will give us middle-aged people some real representation? It only kind of works. Genetics and plastics only get you so far. What gives?
Okay. I have complicated feelings about this because I've watched and I've written about what has happened with Madonna, right? Mm-hmm. Like just the incredibly exacting standards that we have that somehow you should not age.
Yeah.
But if you try to keep yourself young, you become monstrous, essentially. And I think that J.Lo feels most herself. And again, this is probably in part because she hasn't done some of that harder interior work. She feels most herself when she looks the way that she looks when she was 30.
Yeah, this one's a hard one for me because I love it. love it. Yes, I want to see. I mean, what is she want 52, 53? And
She's like she's almost 55.
Yeah, all I wear are crop tops, stilettos. I looked better than an AI version of me in the movie Hustlers by all that olive oil or whatever she uses. And she's just going to be the hottest thing forever. I actually think we've got some great other representation. And I love that J.Lo is delivering sex pot well into her 50s. I love it. I think it's fantastic. There's that meme that says, here's what we thought of women when they were 50 years old. In I believe it's the 80s, and
right,
it
was like the Golden Girls.
Yeah, and then and the other picture is J.Lo at 50, and I think this is just a different type of representation for women. I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I always feel like there's these conversations about, or at least I hear them in like everyday life, like, oh, are these shorts like too short for me at my age? Right? Is this too young? And what makes you feel good? And I think we've gotten to that point when it comes to body image in a lot of other ways, at least collectively, like that is how we've agreed that we can talk that way. But also I think we're still stuck in some funky age stuff in terms of
absolutely. But I mean,
why are they wearing a crop top when they're over the age of 50?
And you know what? Everyone stay in touch, because you'll see me in a bikini at 71. And I plan to do it. I think, Dolly Parton just wore the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader uniform, which is a full midriff. And she had a full Spanx bodysuit on underneath, which I respect. And I think it's interesting who we let be sexy for how long.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, if J.Lo looked an inch different, she'd be punished by so many people economically, career-wise, the roles she gets. She's doing what everyone wants, which is to look like you're 28. However, my favorite part of the documentary is when Ben is like, why are you saying your age is 28?
Yes, it's the best part.
And it's so wild because she cast her real group of friends as real 28-year-olds, but then she's sitting with them being like, right, guys? Like, this is the friend group. And it's like, wait, this was not the correct decision. Why?
No, I think that's where she's living, right? Like, that is where she feels comfortable. And like, I hope that she doesn't, I don't know enough about like the way that she regimes her body. Like, obviously she works out all the time. I know that she does that, and she puts that all over her Instagram. But I hope she's not like, I hope she still eats things, right? Like, I hope she.
Well, I mean, they called her fat and heavy set when she was auditioning to be a Fly Girl. Those words are written in Rosie's book as something I think Keenan said about her. And their whole thing was, you have to lose weight. And that happened to her when she's 18, 19, 20, as the barrier between, are you going to make it in life or not? She's a product of that.
Yep.
And I don't think she's eating, Anne. I love that wish. Beautiful.
I mean, like, there's grace that we can offer to people who were so firmly ensconced and are so firmly ensconced in that understanding of like self-value. It's hard.
It is really hard stuff.
Like you said, there are a lot of other examples of people who have chosen different ways to age. And I think like not everyone has to take the same avenue. That would be my take.
Yeah, I think that diversity to women's aging is actually better for us than I don't know, a homogenized version. And don't forget, she's got a bedazzled Starbucks cup with the Starbucks logo. Also bedazzled. So she's delivering some, I would call that a staunchly 51-year-old take on coffee. Yeah.
How old is Bradley Cooper? Hold on. I'm going to Google this. Age. Bradley Cooper is 49. So he is not that much younger than J.Lo.
Yeah.
And no one's like, why is Bradley Cooper going to hang out at Taylor Swift concerts and dating, is it Gigi Hadid or Bella Hadid? Gigi.
He is wearing giant beanies, oversized blazers, and sweatpants that sweep the floor because baggy is in for Gen Z, with his young girlfriend, like, cruising New York. And everyone's like, what a funny thing to wear, versus like, stop.
I just Googled too. Channing Tatum is 44. And people are like, you know what? You should stop trying to be so cut. Like,
Yeah, stop working out.
Okay, next question. This I need some help with because I haven't seen all of the things that are referenced in this. So this is acknowledging that J.Lo does not make her image on her own. No celebrity makes their image on their own. It's also like an image is the collection of things that people say about the celebrity. So let's hear the question from Anna, which Melody is going to read.
How did an A-list celebrity and her team lose such control of the narrative? The TikTok misinformation and also legitimate ribbing seems like it's permanently altered her public image. To me, J.Lo is a great famous person, but it seems like great swaths of the celebrity watching population now really dislike her.
Okay, I want to start first with us talking about the first part, in which I agree so much, which is that she is a great famous person.
Fantastic.
What makes her such a great famous person?
I do think it goes back to that likability, which is fascinating because she didn't have it at the beginning of her career. She actually was quite vicious, and it's a learned likability, and it's also one that means she needs to stop trying to do these documentaries where you have to be authentic because you need to learn how to be unlikable in those places, and she won't let it go. I also think it's because her talent is being her image and her personality and her persona. She's a great performer. You don't go, oh, what a great singer, what a great actress, what a great performer. And her fashion is always giving, and that's important. The Versace dress, she's always delivering looks. When she's getting groceries, she's got a look on. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think she has charisma. Like, she does. I just think you can't argue with that. And that's something that can't be taught. It can be amplified, but it can't. It's either there or it's not. I think of her like laughing. Like, she seems like she's having a good time being a celebrity. Right?
Yeah.
This has always been the thing about her. And the contrast between her and Ben is that, like, J.Lo's like, I love being a celebrity, and Ben has never liked being a celebrity.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, in every documentary she does, she says, no one will ever know what I think or how I feel. That's who I am. Right. So it's true, though. And I think for most of our years with celebrities, perhaps until this one, that is the way to crush being a celebrity. Don't lose your shit on paparazzi. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't show that you're bored at the very boring awards show that Ben is showing on his face. I think this year is a turn of wanting authenticity and having access to it on TikTok and all these places where what's made her so great isn't working anymore.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about this, what's happening on TikTok? Because first of all, I don't think that the conversations that happen on TikTok are actually things that the vast majority of the celebrity consuming public actually knows in any way. I would say that the vast majority of America, especially over the age of 30, still thinks of J.Lo kind of the same way that they did even 5 years ago.
If you're on TikTok, I don't think she's coming back on TikTok. That doesn't mean that she can't come back in other spaces, and I still think she's a People magazine favorite, and she just ran the Gala. But TikTok has her number in a few ways, and in a few ways that I think are unfair too. There's a bunch of videos that I wouldn't quite give credence to that have become quite viral.
Like what? Can you give me an example?
So the ones where I'm like, yes, this is real. They're pulling her 73 questions where the guy's like, so what's your order at the bodega? And he puts a little thing on it. He's like, bodega. Right. And she gives her bodega order, and then everyone, why was that question in the 73 questions? It's just so clear that her team asked for it. That guy's not asking that question to Nicole Kidman when he does her 73 questions. Yeah. And then her order makes no sense. It's like ham and cheese on a roll with a small bag of chips and an orange drink. And everyone is on TikTok being like, everyone from the Bronx is like, we don't know what an orange drink is. But she's like, if you know, you know. And they're like, we don't. What is this? So it feels like
an Orange
coolness.
Julius? Like, what is it supposed to be? If it was an Orange Julius, I'm like, yeah, let's go to the mall. Let's get an Orange Julius.
But I think like people, she specifically looks at the camera and says, if you know, you know. So she's trying to be like, right, everyone in the Bronx on the block where I lived, where I was Jenny, and all of TikTok went, no. Yeah. So things like that, I'm like, yeah, you know, they got under the hood there. There's other videos where it's like, she doesn't tip well, she won't look you in the eyes, and she, you know, her ensemble, that's not what it's called, her
Posse?
entourage.
Entourage.
Her entourage is like very rude at restaurants. And that's where I sort of have a sliding scale, because the amount of times I've heard of a celebrity who doesn't allow other people to look them in the eyes is too many for all of them to be true.
Right.
So I just don't, you know, or it was like some, you know, some member being like, hey, don't look at J.Lo as she walks by. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure they were rude at that restaurant. But I just think those things have more of a personalized take on them than an entire, like, we can say this is fact.
Did she try to make a TikTok herself?
No,
or was it just excerpts from the questions and that sort of thing?
No, yeah. It was just people pulling the 73 questions themselves, pulling clips of it. The other big thing is that there was this woman who made a bunch of J.Lo videos, and J.Lo's team sued for copyright because it's the way to get these videos that are going quite viral about her, way to get them taken down. And so this woman is like very upset. She's lost her accounts. There's so many copyright notices, and her team has gone through and made them all. And this woman later dies. And TikTok was like, J.Lo killed her. Now, obviously, that's not true.
Yes.
But so that's where it's like, I think TikTok is like really gone too far.
Right.
However, you know, this woman did make these videos about her and talk about her, and like really sadly has passed away.
I think that what this suggests to me is that there's something about J.Lo's personality that is not quite amenable to the way that TikTok handles celebrity. To me, J.Lo is such a young Gen X millennial celebrity.
Who looks like a Gen Z skin-wise.
See, and that's right. And so, like, that makes her vulnerable to this critique in a way that, like, I'm trying to think of a contemporary. Like, I mean, Reese Witherspoon, I've seen some of her stuff, like, on Reels and stuff like that, but she's not trying to be, like, she has kids who are that age, who are Gen Zers. And so there's less of that, like...
if Reese had put out a movie and a docuseries, I think the same thing could
she would get
happen
roasted. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. And I do think, you know, it's like, it's weird that one of her first songs is called I'm Real, because J.Lo refuses to be real. And TikTok is about authenticity.
Right.
Can we talk about how did her team lose the narrative?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Because so this was what blew my mind when I was reading her book. She talks about her manager, Benny, and everyone will talk about Benny as like, that's the first person you're going to hear from. And he's like this real brutish force in the industry. Benny Medina, his true real life story is how the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air became a show. So
right.
That's his life story that then gets pitched to become the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And he's been on the team the whole time and has had this very specific, narrow way of looking at the industry that really worked back then. And he's still trying to play it now. And it doesn't work anymore. And no one they're all so insulated. They've all been doing the same thing for so long. They really need a bold intern who's ready to get fired. To speak up and say something.
Right, because isn't it her agent who's in the documentary who also has been with her forever, right?
Yeah, and a producer, Elaine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like her wardrobe, everything. Everyone has been with, and that loyalty, I understand it, right? It's like, these people get me. They probably don't say no to me as often, right?
How can you? They're all on the payroll.
Right.
And this is what's so important. I'm so glad I didn't forget to say this. She lost her best friend. She and Leah Remini had a quiet friend breakup. She does not have her female best friend to stand there and say, don't do that. What the fuck is this? Not that, this. They're not friends anymore. She wasn't at the wedding to Ben. And yet her photo is the one that, Leah Remini's photo is the one that leaked her and Ben being together. So you can see this time span when they stopped being friends. And I think Leah wasn't on the payroll. Leah was her friend. And I don't think she has enough of those people anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we say this about, like, you know, CEOs, like, whatever. Like, you need someone who is going to say real shit to you and say, like, maybe
no.
Movie about how...
Did you say $20 million? I think we could take a tax credit on that if we put it in the trash.
Maybe the fact that no studio wants to make your movie is a sign, right? Like,
oh, I think that's the most painful thing because, whenever people ask me for advice, my number one piece of advice is make your own work. No one knows what they're doing. Make your own work. You have to prove it to them. And then J.Lo took $20 million and in the docuseries says, what if it's great? What if everyone's wrong and it's great? And then and then she kind of was the thesis of like, yeah, sometimes when you make your own work, it doesn't go well. And that's an important lesson too.
Yes.
I still love her though. I still love her.
I do too. This is the thing is I love her so much and she's such a good celebrity. And do you get her newsletter?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And hello, if you are listening, person who makes J.Lo's newsletter, you cannot put pictures in the newsletter and make them an inch by an inch.
No,
make them bigger, my friend. I don't know who's making you do this. And also whoever's designing her merch, they got to be fired. Did you see the merch? This is me now. No. It was a forest green hoodie, and it was "This is me now" was printed on the back, but on the shoulder, then on the back, and then on the shoulder. Which means anytime someone moved their arms, it would be like hissism. Like it was. What's going on, you guys? Oh, and on her whole motif was subway stops. You gotta get a better artist in there.
That's not you now.
No.
Also, going back to the fact that she's kind of basic. I mean, even like the title of the documentary is "The Greatest Love Story Never Told." Like, I get
you still never told it. Come on, you got back together with Ben in the pandemic after a 20-year separation. How? Who called who? And how does Jennifer Garner feel watching an entire movie be made about how you and Ben were destiny, which means the previous 20 years of your lives were tangents?
And three kids. How does Mark Antony feel?
I'm not so concerned with him because I think he was actually quite controlling of her.
No, and I really like Jennifer Garner a lot. And so I do think she probably is like, interesting.
I mean, if my husband and I divorced and he ended up with someone he even went on one date with before me, I would drive my car into their house. I'd be like, well, you already knew her. What? What?
I felt kind of dirty wishing in the documentary for so much more Ben. Like, he was my favorite part.
Yeah.
And I think it's because he is so bad at being a celebrity that the things that he says when you're bad at being a celebrity, you can either be super boring, right? And just like so banal, or you can inadvertently say things and make faces that like give away the truth, right? So like every time that like Ben is sucking on a cigarette and just like miserable with his Dunkin's iced coffee, like I'm like, right? Like
he is so compelling and likable in that documentary. And also the scenes with them together, I am not, and I am so fine if one day I realize I'm so wrong about this, but like I'm not here for the like he hates being with J.Lo and she makes him miserable. I mean,
oh no,
that man was on Raya. Okay,
yeah,
he was out and about. It's not like there was no one for Ben to choose, and I think they really do love each other, and I do think too. I think he is the only person in her life saying like, don't. Well, I don't know. That script still went to, they still filmed it. I don't know.
He razzes her. Like, he's the only person who can, like, effectively razz her.
And Jane Fonda.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and Jane Fonda. Maybe, like, if she had a couple more Janes in her life.
Mm-hmm. I truly think we could turn the ship around. And I still think we can.
Yeah. Maybe a couple more decades. But I look forward to the documentary when she's in her 70s.
J.Lo is eternal for me. Yeah. And it's so funny. In the 73 questions, they say, what would the title of your memoir be? And instead of saying, I already wrote one and it's horrible, she said, Dance Again and Again and Again. She just gave a new title like she did an already memoir. And it does make me think there is a memoir coming. And if she gets the right ghostwriter, and I think it could be beautiful.
Dance Again and Again and Again.
Well, you got to change the title. That's your first job.
Thank you so much. If people want to find more of you on the internet, where can they find you?
go listen to my podcast, Glamorous Trash with Chelsea Devantez. We've got like 120, 150 episodes on there just ready for the taking. And also I'm on Instagram at Chelsea Devantez. And the way I started my podcast was book clubbing the books in my Instagram stories. So if that's your thing, come be a part of the digital book club. And, my book is everywhere. I did the audiobook too. So go get my longest podcast yet.
I hope everyone goes out and gets your memoir. It is going to be the memoir. I mean, like, if you've read this many celebrity memoirs, like, I can't imagine a better training to write your own memoir. So yes.
Thank you. And, for everyone listening, it is half a comedy gal memoir. It's half funny, and it's half absolutely harrowing trauma. Whatever the opposite of J.Lo's memoir is, where it's mostly pictures, I did the opposite of that. So if that's your thing, go get it.
Amazing. Thank you again.
Thank you, Anne.
So if you were a paid subscriber, right now, you'd be getting the Ask Anne Anything segment. This week, I'm answering 2 questions. One about how to handle it when you become the default person to plan all the baby showers and wedding showers and birthday parties. And then another question about how to handle it when your dog gets older. And in case you missed it, last week we did a roundup post of 10 things you can learn from the AAA segment, including how to create a low-key skincare routine, how to make friends in your 30s and 40s, and how to find the inner strength to keep trying dating apps. You can find that list at culturestudypod.substack.com. And if you like a side of practical life advice with your celebrity gossip, that's also where you can sign up to become a paid subscriber. Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod or check the show notes for a link. If you want to support the show and get bonus content, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's $5 a month, $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, weekly discussion threads for each episode, and a link to a special Google form so that your questions go to the front of the line. And if you're already a Culture Study newsletter subscriber, search your email for Culture Study promo code. It might have also come when you subscribed, like it might have been in that initial information, but you'll be able to find it. If you can't find it, just let me know. I'll send you a direct link. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod. Melody, how'd we do?
So good. But also, I just started Googling, and like today, there are rumors going around that Ben and Jen are splitting.
No, but it's an anonymous source, and the sources are weird. Like, it's not in People magazine. What do you think of that, Melody?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, if it's not in People, it's not real.
Right?
Yeah.
Or TMZ and People is my understanding.
Yeah.
Like, those are
TMZ's
the
real.
ones.
TMZ's real.
I agree.
But allegedly, he's moved out of their marital abode.
I don't want it to be true. I don't want it to be true.
Oh my gosh! What the note we're gonna have to put on that if it comes to be true.
And then me saying, "Look, I'll be wrong, but I don't like that he's not happy with her."